I just about forgot what time it was. I went back to start putting grades in. I got lost. But anyway, all right. So we're going to go in and start on all section 1 stuff with your IDs and SQs and your packet. And you're going to have to do me a favor and remind me, because I did not make myself a note. What number did we stop on the review sheet?
I think the last one we did was 30.
30. Okay, that sounds about right, but I did not make myself a note to remember. Okay. All right, let's do IDs and SQs and then packet, and then we'll go to review sheets. All right, let's see. Okay. All right, section 1, Truman and Eisenhower, number 1 says, what differences could have hindered the return of a peaceful or peacetime economy, excuse me. So this is talking about a couple of things. This is talking about the Korean War, and it's also talking about the Soviet Union having nuclear technology. All right, number 2, why did Congress oppose some of Truman's fair deal policies? This is going to sound bad, but it is very much true. They didn't like Truman, so they were going to oppose a lot of his policies. Truman did not get along with Congress. There were a lot of Dixiecrats, those Southern Democrats, and they just didn't like him. And so not a whole lot actually gets passed during his fair deal policies and his time in office, especially his second term. Number 3, how did Eisenhower describe his approach to politics? That's where his whole legislation comes from. He calls it middle of the road. And he said it's how do I word this? I don't know. I don't even know how I worded it to begin with. Okay. All right. Well, it's just, let's just say, let's use middle road. It's a middle road way to deal with both political parties to make everybody as happy as you can. Middle of the road policies and the best way to make both parties as happy as possible. There's no way that you're going to make everybody happy. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are, but Eisenhower is a fantastic president. He does a pretty awesome job of juggling both sides, the left and the right. So kudos to him for that. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into 23-1 in your packet. This one's just fill in the blank. So just follow along as we go. And a lot of this is coming out from the notes I think that we ended on before spring break, if I'm not mistaken. All right, number 1 says, after the war, many Americans worried that as military production halted and millions of former soldiers glutted the labor market, unemployment, that's the first blank, unemployment and recession might sweep the country. Which tends to be true. Anytime you're getting out of a war, you see a little bit of that post-war inflation, but then it all settles back down, and then you see the economy take off. I mean, it took off in the 1920s, and it's going to take off again in the 1950s, and it's pretty good stuff that comes after that. Number 2 says, higher prices and inflation triggered labor unrest and strikes in the automobile, electrical, steel, and mining. Steel and mining go in those 2 blanks. Steel and mining. All right, number 3, the Taft-Hartley Act outlawed the practice of forcing employers to hire only union members. Union members. That is now illegal. You cannot force somebody to be a member of a labor union just to get a job. So labor unions. All right, number 4 says in February of 1948, Truman asked Congress to pass a board civil rights bill that would protect African Americans African Americans' right to vote. Right to vote. I'm sorry. Just got to squeeze it in best you can. Right to vote, abolish poll taxes. And if you want to make yourself a little side note under poll taxes, that's the 24th Amendment. And make lynching. Lynching's what goes in that last blank. Make lynching a federal crime. Now, do you guys remember what a lynching is?
Was that like the hanging thing, like the public hangings and all that?
Yeah, it's basically a public hanging without any kind of trial, without any jury, judge, witnesses, anything like that. Yeah. All right, number 5 says Truman issued an executive order barring discrimination in federal employment. Again, just fit it in best you can. Federal employment. Federal employment, and he ended segregation where? He was the first president to do this. Where did he do it? Remember? Armed forces. In the armed forces, yeah. So he started with the military. He desegregated the military and then federal employment, and then it kind of trickles down from there. All right, number 6. Although Truman's Republican opponent, Thomas Dewey, and Dewey is D-E-W-Y. Thomas Dewey was a very popular candidate. Truman was able to win the election of 1948 by a narrow margin. And this is the election. The 1948 election is the one where they just knew that it was Dewey. Like they had already printed up the newspapers, if you remember that from the PowerPoint. They'd already said it was Dewey. And so, you know, Truman kind of thought that was like in your face, you know. Number 7, although legislators did not completely support Truman's ideas, they did raise legal minimum wage. Again, I know it's a lot to squeeze in. Legal minimum wage. They increased Social Security benefits and extended them to 4 million additional people. 4 million. I even wrote down a little side note because I didn't think I'd put it in my PowerPoint notes. I was pretty sure that I didn't. That the new minimum wage for the early to mid 1950s was 75 cents an hour. Yeah, 75 cents an hour. All right, number 8 says Congress also passed the National Housing Act, or you could put the NHA. It's up to you if you want to write it out. National Housing Act, which provided for the construction of more than 80,000 units of low-income housing. Low-income housing. Which was accompanied by long-term rent subsidizes. All right, number 9, this is where it kind of makes the transition from finishing with Truman and going to Eisenhower. Truman's term ended as the war in Korea consumed national attention and resources. So Korea kind of ends up being the nail in Truman's coffin, so to speak. You know, we had just finished World War II. Everybody wasn't really happy about jumping into another war as it was. And the fact that Korea ended up taking a couple of years, that pretty much did it for Truman's popularity. All right, number 10 is talking about Eisenhower. So Mr. Dwight D. Eisenhower ran as the Republican nominee for president in 1952. So Eisenhower. And anybody that's old enough to remember, usually you hear that Eisenhower was people's one of their favorites. I mean, he was a really, really cool guy. And again, we know he was in the military. That's kind of one of our things, is that as Americans, we love our wartime heroes. He was the general in Europe during World War II. And then, of course, if you watch that little 30-second promo of the 1952 candidates, and his wanting to call him, Ike. He wants to be everybody's friend, and everybody loved that. They ate it up, thought that was fantastic. All right, quiz question. Who was his VP?
Maddie. No. Oh man, I don't have my notes in there right now, but
It was Nixon, Richard Nixon. Nixon was his VP. So,
all right.
yeah, we can't forget that because Nixon's coming. We ain't got there yet, but Nixon's coming. All right, so number 11 says, shortly after taking office, Eisenhower abolished the RFC. RFC. It's not really important that you know it, but it's talking about the Reconstruction Finance Corps that was established with FDR in the 1930s. But RFC. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I was saying Nixon, but I had it on mute.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. I thought I saw your mouth moving.
Yeah.
But okay. It's all good. It's all good. I believe you. I believe you. All right. 12. 12 says in 1956, Congress passed the Federal Highway Act. Federal Highway Act. The Federal Highway Act was one of the big brainchilds of the Eisenhower administration. Federal Highway Act, which granted $25 billion to build over 40,000 miles of interstate highway. Interstate highway. And again, the biggest reason why Eisenhower pushed for this, now it's going to help our trucking industry, it's going to help tourism, sometimes not really in the best way, because if you've seen the Disney movie Cars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Cars is playing off of the fact that now that there's an interstate highway system, you don't go through the little small towns anymore. Well, that's kind of what's happening with all this. When they build the interstate highway system, you bypass all those small little towns. So the downside is that it actually starts to kill tourism in some of these smaller towns, but overall it helps Americans get faster from the East Coast to the West Coast and everywhere in between, because Eisenhower said that when he was in the military and he was driving from the East Coast and going to California, he said it took weeks to get across the United States because the roads were so bad. Some were still legit dirt roads. And he said that you probably were on a dirt path for miles before you got to the next paved road. And so he had a great idea, and it completely changed tourism. All right, 13. Although he cut federal spending, Eisenhower continued the federal government role. That's the last one, federal government role, by extending Social Security benefits and unemployment compensation to more Americans. So federal government role. All right, so that is it for section 1 in your packet, section 1 in your IDs. And let's see. All right, let me grab your review sheet. Let's see what we got. All right, so we'll split this up. We'll probably end up finishing it up tomorrow. So if we stopped it, did we answer 30 or we stopped at 30?
We answered 30.
We answered 30. Okay. All right, we'll just split it up. We'll do 31 through 34 today, and then we'll just wrap up those last couple questions tomorrow. because I didn't even realize I hadn't done my video PowerPoint for today, but it will happen. All right, 31. 31 says, this business concept born in the 1950s involved an individual being granted permission to copy the business model of a successful business while sharing the profits. And this is what you can do today if you want to run your own Chick-fil-A, run your own McDonald's. You can franchise. That's what it's talking about for 31. Franchising. So franchising a business. You can buy into it. And I think that actually might be on those last couple of slides of that last PowerPoint. I don't remember what number it is now. All right, 32 says, this system of fast-moving highways was promoted by the Eisenhower administration, and that's talking about the interstate highway system. Or, hold on. Is that right?
Yeah.
Federal, no, hold on. What does it want? Just says the system. Interstate highway system. All right, 33, this term refers to the large numbers of children born in the decade after World War II. So this is talking about the baby boomers. Anybody that is born between 1945 and 1960 is considered a baby boomer. So baby boom generation. 34, he was able to develop a vaccine for the crippling polio virus and saved many thousands from this dreaded disease. And that is Salk, Jonas Salk. And I believe, I don't have it in front of me, I'm trying to guess, Jonas-Salk, Jonas Salk. I hope I said that right.
That's
Well,
right.
double. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So unfortunately, it is too late for FDR, who contracted polio in the early 1920s. But now that we have it, we were able to, for a period of time, to eradicate it completely until, of course, you know, celebrities and others said that you don't need to vaccinate your kids. It'll do worse damage.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not judging, just saying. So anyway, all right, so that doesn't leave us but just a couple, but we'll wait and wrap up on those last couple tomorrow.
All right.
And we will do section 3, and there's only 3 sections in this one, plus the content vocabulary activity for you to practice. And I do have another faculty meeting happening on Wednesday, because we're waiting to see if there's going to be updates from Governor Cooper. He's supposed to, in the next week or so, be deciding what's going to happen with schools. Are we leaving it at coming back after the 15th? What's happening with grades, things like that. So as soon as I know, I will pass that on to you. So that meeting happens Wednesday, and I'll let you know if any changes pop up between now and then.
All right.
So did y'all have any questions or concerns? Like I said, I'm not going to lie to you. Not going to lie. When we finished before spring break, I needed to mentally decompress. So I did stop. I was like, I got to get to those grades, but I couldn't do it. So anyway, I'm actually going straight to Power School as soon as I get off, and I'll keep throwing in those grades because, and I don't remember what I told you guys last time, but we're finishing up grades this week. And then unless something changes between now and then, they're supposed to be sending out report cards next week. As of right now, it is still a letter grade. As of right now, we are still supposed to be abiding by the no harm policy, which is basically you can't do worse than what you were doing before we let out. That's kind of what that means. That everybody's situation is a little bit different. So if somebody was making an A and they drop down to a B, we're supposed to keep them up until we find out if we're not going back. If we're not going back, chances are they're probably going to change us over, just like seniors, to the pass-fail situation. So anyway, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that I will know more on Wednesday.
All right.
So that's all I got for right now, unless I hear something else. But did you guys have any questions about anything?
No. Good.
Okay. All righty. Well, stay tuned. I'll keep you in the loop as I find out info. And
All right.
we'll do it all again tomorrow.
Okay, thank
Bye.
you.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.